Okay, gentlemen, we are ready to go. We are live. Hello to everyone that is watching us on Rockfin, on Odyssey, Rumble, YouTube, and on Locals, the Duran.locals.com. Great to have everyone with us. A big hello to our moderators as well. Zarael, Tish M, Valley S. Thank you for that super chat, Valley S. Reckless Abandon. Who else? Peter. Good to have you with us, Peter. And I think those are our moderators. And we have with us the one and only Alexander Mercouris. How you doing, Alexander?
I'm very well. Very delighted to be on this program today.
Say
Very
hello.
delighted.
Say hello, Alexander. And we have with us.
I'm saying hello. Hello. Yes.
We have with us the brilliant Mr. Tom Luongo. Tom, how you doing?
I'm very well, guys. It's good to see you. It's been a while since we've chatted. I know you guys are really busy. And before we get started this morning, I really do want to say I'm really pleased for both of you that I know how hard you've worked to build the Duran to where it is, and I know where it came from because I was there with you during the dark days, and it's great to see the success that you guys are having, and it's really and the effect that you're having on the zeitgeist. I think it's really important. So thank you for give me the opportunity to catch up and all that. More that than anything else. I don't really,
likewise for you as well,
Likewise.
Tom. And we are going to talk about Tom's latest analysis and some of the work that he has been putting out there, which is very relevant and very interesting. So, Alexander, I think we're ready to go. Let's begin, Alexander and Tom.
Absolutely. It's a brilliant article that Tom has written on his own website, which I think we need to mention and talk about. And it's been republished.
All the links in the description box.
All the links below.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. We thought it was so important and so good that we've already done a program about it, talking about some of the ideological aspects of this. But of course, we can't just do justice to an article like that ourselves. So we're very delighted and very privileged to have Tom himself here explaining this article very well. And of course, it's about Europe. It is about what is going on in Europe now. And it's not just Europe and the attempt of some people to construct Europe, but it is also about the pressures that this project is coming under. Pressures that Tom has been talking about for a long time, ever since the Fed started to raise interest rates in the United States, and part of the agendas that the Fed is pursuing. And we're starting to see the effect of this, and the fact that this is having the crushing effect that this is having on the people who are running the EU project and the financial institutions which underpin the EU project, and the very, very troubling and sinister, and dare I say it, straightforwardly illegal moves that they're planning to take in order to address these various problems. So it's all about Eurobonds, but that's only part of the story. I think the first thing to do is to go over to you, Tom, and perhaps you can explain the points that you were making in that article.
Sure. Thank you, Alex. I appreciate that. The what's really and it's not like the law means anything to these people. Only when it matters to them to advance their agenda. Otherwise, the law is just something and it's an inconvenience. So the goal here is the biggest problem for the EU has been something that Martin Armstrong had to educate me on 10 years ago, which is that the euro is a currency of contrivance because they don't have any form of integrated tax and spend authority. They have 20 member central banks issuing euros based on different debt profile, different debt validity profiles. Like you've got people like Greece and Italy and Germany in the same union, and they're issuing debt at different rates and different risk profiles and all the rest of it. And so the European Union has been able to construct itself as a political union assiduously, almost like these people are running Microsoft project as a Gantt chart. Like, we're going to do this on this date, we're going to do this here, and we need to do that there. But the fiscal integration that is necessary to make the political integration that they've achieved stick has to come in the form of giving centralized tax and spend authority to the European Commission. Now, Alex, you and I talked about this years ago during COVID when they issued the Sure bonds. So that's why I brought it up in the article. I brought it up back in an article I wrote back in on Halloween, actually, when Lagarde was out there, ECB President Christine Lagarde was out there screaming that, hey, it's time that we create an index for these Euro bonds to up their profile so we can get investors to buy into them. Well, yeah, but they were trading at 55 cents on the dollar at that point. And that's when I went into that whole thing, and I educated myself on where that was. I remember the beginning of the story. Hey, let's get the camel's nose under the tent to start giving the EC, the European Commission, tax and spend authority. But okay, so what's the project actually look like? And of course, it looks like the typical created market, which is that there is no market for these things. They shook down the member central banks to buy $200 billion of these Sure bonds, and now they're sitting on 45 and 50% losses on them. But they still want to keep going forward. So now they're using the war in Ukraine as the means by which to do the next tranche. And they put it in, of course, the mouth of the highly Russophobic and highly, WEF adjacent Kaja Kallas of Estonia to say, we need war bonds to pay for the reindustrialization of Europe and the remilitarization of Europe to fight the boogeyman of Putin. Putin is clearly nothing more than a political thing for the Europeans. I do not believe that that's the case for the Anglo sphere, for the British and American neoconservatives who see the Russians in a fundamentally different light. So there's that tension, right? And that tension exists within NATO. But the goal here, as always, has been, if you think about the overarching plan, has always been to morph NATO and the European Union and the American empire and roll it all up into the UN. It's always been the goal. I don't think it's a good goal. I don't think it's an achievable goal, but that's the project. That's the Gantt chart, right? And all the people who put this thing together are dead now, right? So Jacob Rothschild was one of them, and he died on Monday, right? And Kissinger's gone, and Brzezinski is gone, and they're all gone, right? So now you just have the flying monkeys running around, the project managers running around doing this thing and trying to shoehorn this into the future, and they can't get it done because they're standing back and they could do it, or they could have a better chance of doing it have the world been able to stay at 0% interest rates. And they were selling the idea that we had to stay at 0% interest rates because of climate change. So they were selling us on climate change and cars and electric cars and all this stuff. And Lagarde's out there saying we need to spend trillions and trillions. And the only way we're going to spend trillions on this is, of course, to stay at the zero bound in order to make this affordable. And then there's the Fed going, yeah, that's nice. No, 5.5%. You get to do this at 5.5%. You don't get to do it at 0%. And of course, at 5.5%, the whole project is completely uneconomic. And now we're starting to see the cracks in this. But they keep pushing forward because they don't have any other options, guys. What else are they going to do? Admit defeat? This is the European Union. They don't admit defeat. They just double down. No. And people that vampires don't cast reflections in a mirror. That's who these people are. So that's the core of the arguments, the core of what I was talking about. And and we can get into the other implications on this, which is, of course, why NATO is so important to them. Because NATO is part of the longer term plan to push this whole project forward, to turn NATO into the global police force for global government. That's their idea. And it's a dumb idea. And I'm never advocating for it. And two, I'm not even advocating that they can pull it off, because there are too many other forces around the world going, yeah, we don't want that. And all they really have to do is just sit back and say no. And you let the Fed raise interest rates, and the Russians keep, and OPEC, or now BROPEC with Brazil, keeps oil prices above $80 a barrel, and and they're just getting drained of all their collateral, and it's just all going to collapse. And that's where I think we're closer to that than we've ever been before.
Now let's get. Thanks for all of that. Now let's get to this question of euro bonds, because it goes directly to what you were saying about the artificial nature of this entire structure. Because if you're going to be a borrower and you go to a lender and you ask to borrow money, a responsible lender is going to ask you the very first question: what is your cash income? What is the cash flow that is coming to you? Now, if you are the EU, the answer straightforwardly is you don't have one, because you're not drawing directly through taxes from the people that you are governing, because you're not a state, you've got no consent, you've got none of these things. You are entirely dependent on funding that you are getting from the various states that make up the EU. So that is the problem, as I see it, that you have. And that's the underlying problem with the whole Eurobond idea. It's also the whole problem with the whole EU structure. Because if you're talking about a currency, what makes a currency strong? What makes a currency, in fact, ultimately a proper currency? It is that it is the expression of the economy, the material wealth, the structure of a country produced by the state, which governs that country through the institutions of that state. And of course, again, the EU isn't a state, never has been. So you have a currency which functions in a completely different way from every other currency, because it is not underpinned by a treasury department, a economic policy. There isn't a proper, at least no disclosed economic policy, nor can there be. There is none of that. And that, again, points to the artificial nature of the whole structure. So am I correct in saying, Tom, that one of the points you're making essentially is this: you can do all of these things. You can issue Eurobonds. You can issue, you can run single currencies like the euro. But of course, what you can't afford to have is costs. You can't have costs, because as you have no secure money flow, you can't operate it. You haven't got the structure that supports an economy, and you don't have the cash with which you can pay back your loans.
What it comes down to, Alex, is you're right. It's about the risk profile of the bonds that you're issuing. So I'm going to give you a perfect example of. So the EU is trying to turn itself into a government, right? A pan-European government. It needs to be able to sell these bonds to investors. It needs to have the cash flow. It needs to be able to have provable cash flow and provable political will to tax their people to pay the coupons, right? So this was Alexander Hamilton's argument about why the 13 colonies, after the Revolutionary War, needed a singular debt structure. We needed U.S. treasuries. We didn't need New York bonds and Georgia bonds and Massachusetts bonds, or in the case of the United States today, we don't have Mississippi, Iowa, and Alaska issuing treasury bonds. We have, which is what we have in Europe today. We have the Treasury Department of the United States and the Federal Reserve working together to issue the debt that the market wants. And as long as the central government of the United States can prove to the market that it can get the cash flow necessary to pay the bonds, then the bonds are going to are going to be sold and traded at a yield that is reasonable. The EU wants this to come into being, and they want to prove that to the world, which is why, by the way, for example, why were they so insistent on Viktor Orban giving them their cookie on 50 billion euros worth of Ukraine aid? It had nothing to do with the $50 billion for Ukraine. It had everything to do with ensuring that Viktor Orban, one of the smallest countries in Europe, could not dictate policy to the rest of the EU. They had to come down hard on him. They had to threaten him with basically sanctions that they've already tried to place on Russia. Like literally, they threatened him with that. But it was because they had to prove to the market, because they knew they were going to come to the market with trillions of dollars worth of euro bonds, and they want to be able to sell those at the lowest rate possible. And that means that you have to show the most political solidarity in order to get that done. Conversely, let's just to put an even finer point on this. If we go through a political breakup here in the United States, which is, you know, a different topic for a different day as to whether that's possible, but just let's say that it happens, then we would have, like, Florida declares independence. I can look at Florida's balance sheet, and I can look at its income statement and its balance sheet and everything else, and I can go, yeah, we could become the Sunshine Republic of Florida and go out tomorrow and sell to the market with no problem 30-year debt at 3%, 2.5%. The European Union wants to sell it at that rate, and they can't get the rest of it. There's no way. The market wants 7 or 8%, and the European Union can't afford to pay 7 or 8%. And that's the issue here. So what they're trying to do is, so conversely, so outside of the purview of this problem that they've got, now they're trying to manipulate events around them in order to get the rest of the world to follow them back to where they need interest rates to be, which is why I firmly believe that we have the Biden administration, especially Janet Yellen, working with Christine Lagarde to cap U.S. interest rates in order to try and run the clock out, force the United States into a recession, to get Powell to pivot and go back to the zero bound in some way, manner, shape, or form, to create a crisis big enough that everybody goes back to the zero bound like we did during COVID, and then they can do what they did during COVID, issue a couple $100 billion worth of sure bonds, which are, as I said at the top of the show, trading in right now at about 40 cents, 40% haircut. It's about 60 cents on the dollar. So, and when I say trade, I'm being very generous here. There's usually one trade a week, by the way, on the Frankfurt market for these things. There's no liquidity in them whatsoever. If they were a real market, they would trade every day, and we get a real bid-ask spread on the trades, and, you know, it would look like a normal market. It doesn't. This is clearly nothing but a political construction, and politically constructed markets are very brittle, and they're not markets, but, you know, we live in hyper politicized markets as well. So this is a weird moment in time. And then you got to ask yourself, okay, well, I know a lot of people believe that, like, the West is one big monolith. Well, when it comes to, like, destroying Russia, sure. But when it comes to all the other projects that are going on, though, everybody's got their own agenda that they're running, and it's a big Venn diagram of everybody's incentives. And on certain issues, the Venn diagram crosses, and so we get Victoria Nuland agreeing with Emmanuel Macron that we need to send troops into NATO, but on everything else they don't agree. Like, so, and that's the issue, and that's where that's where the idea of, there's no way that the American banks are going to allow the Europeans to issue Eurobonds at 0.1% or 0.2%. When America is running a $34 trillion, debt load. There's no way. It's not going to happen.
I'd like to get to the US and what they're thinking and what the Fed is doing shortly. But let's focus again on Europe, because directly after your article appeared, and I said I wonder, frankly, whether it was partly also provoked by your article. An article appeared in the Daily Telegraph by actually a rather intelligent writer there on economic matters, a man called Matthew Lynn. And he was talking about the fact that the European central banks are in crisis. They are all losing money, including, most worrying of all, the Bundesbank. The Bundesbank is in a very, very bad position. And the deterioration of its position has been incredibly rapid, apparently. It really started to go wrong when Mario Draghi said, that he will do whatever it takes in order to preserve the euro. And they went off on a massive bond buying enterprise, buying government bonds, the Italian government bonds, the Greek government bonds, all those government bonds in Southern Europe. And just to repeat again your point, each country in Europe issues its own bonds. This is the nature of the European structure. So this is what he said. And he made precisely the point that you have made, which is that it was possible to go on doing this, to get the European Central Bank to create money, to buy bonds, up to a certain point at least, whilst interest rates were at zero. But the moment interest rates in the United States started to rise, that has become more and more difficult. And he was talking about the fact that the Bundesbank in Germany might need to be bailed out, and that the German government might have to face the prospect of doing that fairly soon. And he was debating what the political effect in Germany of that would be. And he did also make the further point that the European equivalent of QE has been much bigger than what has happened in the United States. So tell us a bit more about this. Why are the European central banks so short of money? Why is it that all the bonds they've been buying are putting them in this terrible position? And how does the rise in the interest rates affect this?
Okay, yeah, it's like you're asking for the primitives. I keep going like all the way to the end because this is the way
I
my
know,
brain
I know,
operates.
I know, but
Sorry.
you know, I
No,
have to take you
that's
so
no
that we
problem,
get
Alex.
to,
I do have to remind myself to slow down every once in a while. Thank you. So, like, I need to think of it this way: when a bond is issued, right, it's issued at par, and we call par 100. So it trades at $100, right? The quoted price of 100. That's at that particular coupon rate. So let's say it was issued at negative 0.6%, like Draghi was doing on short-term interest rates in the Bundesbank. And Germany in particular was vulnerable to this because they were the ones who were able to issue the most debt, most negative yielding debt originally. So they issue these bonds at, basically they issue them at nearly 0%. Interest rates are pushed, market interest rates are pushed negative, and that means that pushes the price of the bond above 100 because people are willing to forego. They'll take they will offset the coupon that they're getting paid with the price rise, and that's part of the bond calculation. So when bonds rise in price, they fall in yield because they pay a constant yield. So let's just like back up and let's talk about a normal bond. You've got a bond that pays a 4% coupon, right? Pays every year, it's going to pay you 4%. Well, that's at par. If the price of the bond rises to 120, that means that the yield, you're now paying $120 for $100 worth of bond. That means that the yield, you're still getting 4% on $100. So, but you paid 120, so you got to subtract that $20 out, and then so it's now a 3.2% bond or whatever the number is in effective yield. And that's those are the prices that are quoted every day, is what the bond is trading at. And this is the hardest thing for people to wrap their brains around, because bond math is completely opposite of everything else. So when bond prices rise, that means that yield falls, and conversely, when yields rise, prices fall, because now it's the same thing in reverse. You had a 4% bond, you paid $80 for that $100 bond, you're now making 5% on your capital that you invested. You invested $80, you're getting a 4% coupon on $80. That's do the math, right? That's 5%. So that's the problem here. You have all of these European sovereign bonds that were issued at the zero bound, 0.1%, 0.2%, German 10 years at 6.6%, or 30 years at 1% or whatever. And now they're all trading much higher than that. So everybody who has those in their portfolios, even if they haven't sold them, the value of the portfolio is underwater, right? And so this is affecting the value of commercial real estate, of bond funds, of leverage loan CDOs, and this and that, and all this stuff that we talk about. It's all predicated on the fact, like, this is the big story that we have here in the United States, that we have all these regional banks that were forced to buy treasuries at the zero bound in order to offset their reserve, their deposits. And now they've got impairments on their balance sheet. They've got all these deposits, but they don't have the assets on their balance sheet, the bond portfolio, that would match the deposits. And now they have a hole in their balance sheet. Because again, bank balance sheets are completely opposite of your balance sheets, right? Loans are assets, deposits are liabilities. So again, and guys, this took me years to learn. Like, this is not easy stuff, right? So understanding that that's the situation. So with the Fed going to 5.5% and staying there, despite the protestations and the wailing and gnashing of teeth of literally the entire world, they're staying there. And while at the same time domestically doing all sorts of things that I could spend an hour going into as to how it's offsetting the effect on the American banking system. Okay. Whereas it's cushioning the blow for American banks, but leaving everybody else to hang. And this is what's known as killing off the Fed put, where the Fed is not going to come in and bail out the world if the world gets into trouble because the Fed went to 5.5%. And Europe is the most vulnerable to this because Europe went negative. At one point during COVID, there were $14 trillion at its peak of European sovereign debt that was trading at a negative nominal yield. Not the coupon yield, the nominal yield, meaning they were trading at 130, 140%. They're trading 130, 140. And now they're trading at 60. And this is why with the minute Powell started raising interest rates rapidly during the summer of 2022, Lagarde came out and went, I'm creating the transmission protection instrument, which is otherwise, I like to call it the toilet paper initiative because it's what it's going to turn the euro into. But it was a program to say, look, we are going to manage the spreads between all of the different sovereign bonds. And everybody at the time said they're trying to manage Italian bonds, which were blowing up, versus German bonds. No. It's been to manage U.S. bonds versus German bonds and maintain those spreads because of the structure of the market. You manage those spreads in order to then, by extension, manage all the spreads. Okay, because the U.S. Treasury market, like the U.S. 10-year and the U.S. 2-year, are the rates that everybody keys their rates off of, because we're the reserve currency of the world. And if the reserve currency is saying, nope, higher for longer, y'all need to deal with higher for longer. And so now it's you've put the ECB into a box. And I from the moment this started, I went there and said the Fed's doing this on purpose, and they're trying to break the offshore dollar banking system. I hate to say this, but I've been right about all of this. And I'm not busting my hand, patting myself on the back. I'm just, here we are 2.5 years later. The Fed hasn't pivoted yet. And now the market is finally beginning to realize that the Fed's not going to cut because it doesn't have the ability. It can't cut. We're at full employment and we're at 3% and rising inflation again. There's no way the Fed can cut rates. So everybody is now stuck in amber. And what you're seeing, especially today, we're doing this on the final day of February. And as a market watcher, as a guy who watches markets technically, I can tell you that what's happening in the markets literally as we're speaking is them, what we traders like to call painting the tape. They're banging the close in order to bring the numbers down into the end of February so that the monthly closes look good. And then in March, everything's going to snap back in the other direction. And I see this as plain as day. But again, this is 25 years worth of market experience and watching the manipulation of these markets and how they can be and how they're manipulated in order to try and hold everything together. I think the best metaphor for this is that literally it's Lagarde is just a little Dutch boy, and there every day another hole springs up, but now she's run out of fingers and she's run out of spackle and she's run out of, and the dam is breaking around her. And the Bundesbank is the key, because the Bundesbank is what funded through Target 2 and OMT and all these alphabet facilities that Draghi created. The Bundesbank is the one who took all that money on, is the one that did financed all the QE and all the rest of it. And so their balance sheet has been the one that's been hollowed out. Now you got to ask the question, and this is where the conspiratorial side comes. Did they do it on purpose? In order to collapse the Bundesbank, in order to create the collapse necessary to get the fiscal integration that they so desperately need, and turn the keys to Europe over to the European Commission and the European Central Bank. That's been my thesis for these people for years. And George Soros has told you that's what the plan is. And others have said the same thing, and Lagarde has effectively said the same thing. They can't really say it all directly. They have to talk around it, and then you know them by their policy. So that's, I think, the situation. And then you get Bruno Le Maire come out the other day, the French finance minister, and go, why haven't we stolen the $35 trillion worth of savings from the European people in order to fund climate change? It's like literally a project manager reading the Gantt chart going, we were supposed to have done this by now. It's 2024. We were supposed to do this last year. They can't do it because the Fed went to 5.5% and stayed there. That's the long and the short of it. So,
well, as a matter of fact, you anticipated my next question, because I was wondering whether perhaps all this talk of Eurobonds now, all of these problems with the central bank, the German central bank, the way in which we keep the war going isn't partly intended to make it easier to sell the idea of setting up direct taxes and creating a treasury department in Brussels and doing all of those things. Because, if you have a sort of big financial crash across Europe as a result of all of this, it's not very easy to sell to the European public, well, we've got to actually start taxing you even more at a central European Brussels level in order to bail out the euro and the whole euro project. I mean, in Germany especially, they would never buy that. But tell them that it's all about Russia and it's all about war, and we've got to do all of this because the bear is on the move. Well, suddenly it becomes easier, and of course, could that be? But I think you've already answered this question. I mean, could that actually be the agenda? You bring everything to a point of crisis. You talk up the Russian threat, and then you first of all you go for the euro bonds, and then you say, well, we got the euro bonds. We now need to complete the structure. We've got to create the Treasury Department, the finance, the tax systems, all of those things. And we've got to do so fast. And of course, we can't have any debate about it, because if we do, then the emergency is so pressing and the danger is so great. And with the Russians at our door, we can't really talk about these matters publicly at all. Anyway, I think you've answered the question.
You're absolutely right, Alex. Again, I put on my I put on my Sith robe, and I start thinking like Emperor Palpatine, and I go, well, how would I do this? Like this, and that's what and the thing about these people is that they tell you what they're going to do. They've written all the unreadable white papers imaginable to explain all this. When they go to conferences where they don't think they're being filmed, they talk about this stuff openly. It's not like this really isn't even a conspiracy. It's just a matter of, it's just not reported on by the media. What I find really interesting is that I don't know how the Telegraph maps politically within the UK. Like, I know that the WAPO, that the Washington Post works for the CIA, and the New York Times works for the DNC, and I know the map here in the United States. I don't know how the British papers play out. I find it really interesting that he was allowed to write that article explaining all this in England at this moment in time, because the English are getting squeezed out of NATO. Because let's bring now NATO into all this, because the future of NATO is very important. Who got floated this week as the replacement for Stoltenberg as General Secretary of NATO? The soon-to-be deposed Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte. Who is Mark Rutte? He's literally one of he's like the Tony Blair of the Netherlands. He's an important cog in this globalist machine to get these things done. So he's going to leave. They can't hold Geert Wilders out of office for forever. They'll pass every terrible law imaginable on their way out the door. Then they'll leave him with the cleanup job, and then they'll blame him for everything that goes wrong in the Netherlands because they saddled him with a whole bunch of poison pills. Meanwhile, Rutte goes to NATO, and that's telling you that the European Union is making a bid for the power structure of NATO. After Joe Biden last year put the kibosh on former defense minister of the UK, Ben Wallace, to take over for Stoltenberg. And knowing that Biden is a proxy for Obama, and Obama is American version of Tony Blair and Mark Rutte, and it all tracks. They're moving NATO this way, and it's why everybody went to Munich and said the same thing over and over again. Our sacred on duty to NATO. NATO is eternal. We have to do blah 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 blah. It was all about NATO, and because NATO is the means by which to justify, as you pointed out, Alex, that we have boogeymen out there we need to be protected from, and we need to rearm. And again, but these arms that they want to rearm with aren't going to be pointed at Russia. They're going to be pointed at the European people. That's the point of all this. So that Germans police Spanish, and Spanish police Dutch, and Dutch police Italians, and Italians police Germans, because the French would never allow the Italians to police them. Then we get into like the Treaty of Quirinal that was signed that allows French troops onto the Italian soil, and there's all this stuff going on behind the scenes, folks. This is exactly what they're trying to do, and they're doing the same thing here in the United States by leaving the border open. They're gonna put all these men that are coming across the border. They're gonna move them into the military, and then they're gonna use the military. Then they expect to be able to use the military in the United States as a kind of national police force, and turn the whole country and turn the whole thing into a John Carpenter movie. I'm like, it's not gonna. I got news for you. We got 800 million guns. It ain't happening. But I don't know what you guys are gonna do. I love what I'm seeing out of the French, like the German farmers, right? I saw just before I came on this morning. I saw a video of a massive protest in Bayern, in Germany. People screaming, "It's time for you to go. Just leave. Just leave." And that's exactly the right message, by the way. It's not, we're going to string you up and, feed you to dogs or, guillotine you. Just leave. We're done with you. We don't want you around anymore. And I hope that brush fire that's forming in Europe catches fire in a way that is, one, nonviolent, two, and two, substantive, in order to stop what's happening. That's what I'm hoping for. Well, we'll see if it happens.
By the way, I think I can say that we both agree with you about the EU army, and I mean it's very interesting again that we see some people in Europe are talking up the European army, using again the threat from Russia to justify accelerating its creation. And of course, we had Macron, who's a committed European, trying to get talking about sending troops to Ukraine, but of course, he's a general along has been to create an EU army. And you mentioned Mark Rutte. Of course, he is, more than anything else, he has been a pillar of the European Union for a long time. I mean, he's somebody who's more thought of as a person within the European Union, actually, up to recently, than as a key figure within NATO. So that's all very, very interesting. I should say quickly that I'm unfortunately more skeptical than you that all this bushfire is going to change anything, because I mean, the one thing that they're not talking about, by the way, is central elections for the Central European institutions. Nobody so far is proposing that. Why is the United States doing this? Why is the Fed taking this approach? Why have they done this? Why have they raised interest rates so high? Why did they not bring down interest rates more when it seemed like inflation was falling? Lots of people are asking that question. You read it every day in the European media, by the way. So why did they not do what the Europeans wanted them to do?
Well, this is the core of what I've been saying for a couple of years, and I know that when I first presented this, everybody was skeptical of this, but the reality is that when you start to think about what their agenda is for how they're going to replace the current unworkable monetary situation in Europe that we've gone over, they have to replace it with a centralized digital euro. I can even bring Apple into this, which is why the EU wants the ability to sideload apps onto the iPhone. It's because they want to install their surveillance software and directly and on the backside. I firmly believe that's what this is. That's what that story is about. I'm getting to why. So my argument has been from the beginning, when you think about this, we have a two-tiered monetary system. We have central banks issue money to make loans to commercial banks at a lower rate, and then the commercial banks make loans to the general economy, and it's a two-cycle monetary system. So there's money that flows between the commercial banks and the central bank, and then there's money that flows between the economy and the commercial banks. Well, a central bank digital currency, a digital euro, collapses that, and we no longer need the commercial banks. So my fundamental thesis from the beginning, when I took one look at that, I said, yeah, I don't buy that the American commercial banking system is going to go along with this. They're the most powerful commercial banks in the world. They have been for decades now, and I just don't see Jamie Dimon and John Solomon and the rest of them going along with this. I just don't see it. Like, the American empire, for lack of a better term, was built through commercial banking. Okay, the American engine of growth of the 19th century was built because we had a mostly free banking industry, which was then subverted over time with the formation of the Federal Reserve, and then the consolidation of the American government, and blah 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 blah, and everything post 1913. As that's but you go before that and you look at that. I've been arguing for years, and Murray Rothbard wrote, I think, still the best book on this, which is and effectively saying that the history of banking in the United States is the history of the United States. And so why would the Fed do this? Well, to preserve itself and the commercial banking interests that it represents, and who are the shareholders of the Federal Reserve. Like, it's not more complicated than that. You have a bunch of committed globalists who believe fundamentally that we need to get rid of commercial banking and do away with the private formation of capital through the commercial banking process. And we have commercial bankers who don't believe in that. So we can either have public formation of capital with controlled interest rates and fully locked down markets that are based on a social credit system, access to capital, social credit, as opposed to investment risk and economic desires which comes directly from the economic desires of the people that make up the economy. And that's what the commercial banking sector ultimately, that's who they ultimately serve. That's whom they ultimately work for, right? And it's their job to accurately assess the risk of the stupid things that we want to make into businesses, and they then put an interest rate on that loan. And they're supposed to do that. And we've completely short-circuited that process, both with the centrality of central banks setting interest rate policy and risk profiles, and pushing interest rates globally to the zero bound over the last 100 years. And the reversal, once you hit the zero bound, like, the natural snapback is to go in the opposite direction. And the commercial banks are like, yeah, we're not committing harikiri. We're not committing ritualistic suicide for a bunch of, frankly, European communists. We're not doing it. And, you just put it in like those bold terms, because that's the way I see it happening at, the cigar bar on the Upper East Side. When these guys all get together and they put their phones, at the coat check, and they go into the room where that's been swept, and they all sit around and have their talk. This is what they do. Like, can you see that? I can't see it any other way. Even if they were willing to go along with it for years when they were making money off of it and they had no other opportunity to do anything otherwise. Like, they're not. I don't see any of these people as anything other than sociopaths operating in their own best self-interest. They are operating on enlightened self-interest, right? That's it. But that makes sense to me. And so for right now, they're pushing back against this. And I think they also have tremendous political power here in the US. And they have the ability to communicate to other world leaders and to other world business leaders what's going on. And then our goal now is to watch inferentially, read the tea leaves of all the things that are happening to see if that thesis plays out with inferential data. Because you'll never get Jamie Dimon to stand up on CNBC and go, yeah, we're trying to bankrupt the ECB. He's never going to say that. But you have to watch for this policy that may support that. And then you go, oh yeah. And then you get Powell come out and go, yeah, we're going to stay at 5.5%. So they did it in order to protect themselves and in order for the Fed to regain control over monetary policy by collapsing the offshore levered up, what's known as Eurodollar system, which is another, 15-minute rant on my part in order to explain the mechanisms of that. But once you see it that way, it's really hard to not see it that way. And the day that I see data points that contradict that, I will be happy to come on the program and go, nope, well, I was wrong, and that'll be the end of it. But so far I don't see that. What I'm seeing actually is that politically downstream of all this, we're seeing exactly what we should be seeing if this were the case, which is we're seeing congressional Republicans stand up, depose a globalist Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, put Mike Johnson in power, stand up to the Biden administration, and say no more, no mas, no more funding for Ukraine without stopping the border, no more this, no more that. Yeah, and he's trying to do his best to slow things down. And then the old guard, the Chuck Schumers, the Mitch McConnells, the Mitt Romneys, and whatnot, are continuing to try and push this down the road. Janet Yellen came out yesterday and said we should seize all of the Russian foreign exchange reserves and hand them to Ukraine. That would destroy the United States as we currently know it, as a financial supercenter. Why would Yellen do that? She knows what that would do. She'd take $40 billion and hand of Russian foreign exchange reserves, hand it to Ukraine, and then the tens of trillions of dollars in global trade that are done in the dollar and with U.S. banks would then immediately, that money, like you're a Turkish, you're a Turkish cymbal salesman, and you sell me some new 15-inch crashes for my drum set, right? And then you deposit that money, then I pay for those cymbals in an American bank. What's the first thing he's going to do? He's going to take that money, he's going to move it out into a different currency and get it out of the American bank, because the Americans may seize that money tomorrow because Erdogan said, didn't toe the line. Like, it destroys the American superpower, which is the validity of you can do business in the dollar and your money is safe. Like, so she effectively wants to default on bonds, which we've never done, and she wants to destroy the ability of the security of doing business in dollars. And this is the American Treasury Secretary, and people tell me she's not a traitor. She's either that or she's just dumb. And I don't think Janet Yellen's an idiot. I think she's not smart, but I don't think she's an idiot. So, like, this is what's anybody talking about this in the United States is clearly a traitor and clearly working for foreign interests. I pick your poison as to which foreign interests they work for. I don't care. But as far as I'm concerned, it makes no sense otherwise.
Yeah. This is because the whole business of the Russian assets has been obviously a big topic. But can we just go back to the United States?
Sure.
From what you say, though, the Biden administration, for its part, is not signed up to this policy of the Fed at all. Is that why they are so resistant to it? And is that why also they are, because putting down their foot on the fiscal accelerator to the extent that they are? Is it that they're trying to mitigate what the Fed is doing?
Yes, they are trying to spend as much as humanly possible in order to blackmail the Fed into lowering rates. This is why Janet Yellen issued 83% of the debt that she issued in 2023 was of 1 year maturity or less, in order for all of that debt to be rolled over, pretty much next month, in order to try and blackmail the Fed into going lower so that she can reissue that debt at lower rates. It's all part and parcel of the same strategy. And Powell's like, nope, sorry, you're going to have to deal with higher interest rate payments. And, and to my financial brethren out there that are calling out the deteriorating fiscal situation in the United States, you're right. We can't afford to pay for $34 trillion in debt at 5.5%. I agree. So with current spending, but I also know that you could cut spending in the United States back to 2018 levels, and it would change the dynamic completely. And the market in general would look at that incredibly favorably. It wouldn't solve the United States' problems, but it would signal, you're serious about this. Okay. Yeah, we'll put our money here as opposed to Europe. And then that's when the day that happens, the day they actually get any spending cuts through of any significance, and I mean real spending cuts. I don't mean slowing the growth of spending as was the previous plan. Here's our current budget, and we were going to grow, I don't know, the health and human services by 5%. It was only we'll only raise it by 2% a year. And so we've cut spending by 3%. That's what they do normally. That's how they sell this nonsense. No, give me $500 billion worth of actual spending cuts, where next year's budget is $500 billion smaller than last year's budget. You do that, and you'll see trillions of dollars flow into the United States. The euro will drop from $1.08 to 90 cents overnight. And that's why Chuck Schumer won't budge on any of this stuff. That's why Mitch McConnell won't budge on any of this stuff. That's why Nikki Haley is still in the presidential race. This is all an operation to try and get through. They will run this out all the way to November. Nothing is going to change in the United States politically until November for this reason. And then the question is, okay, are the forces that I'm talking about, are they powerful enough to actually get Trump across the finish line and into the Oval Office by January 2025? That's the outstanding question on all of this. If I'm right about all of this, watch Trump and all of the lawsuits and all the other things that are going around him, because if so, if all that stuff keeps falling and we get through each of these like major steps, the primary, Super Tuesday, the next Fed meeting, the GOP convention, all of these stupid lawsuits that are pending against Trump, we actually get to the election and Trump wins and they don't kill him between then and now, and Nikki Haley is not his running mate, which is clearly why she's running, still in the race, then we may be looking at a much different world in 2025. Do I put high probability on any of this happening? No. I think it's going to be worse than, I think we're going to be treated to the worst version of this show that we could possibly imagine. But I'm giving you what the path looks like to get to the end game. What the game, how bloody the game is between now and then, I'm expecting bad. I'm expecting very bloody, and I'm expecting false flags to try and upgrade Ukraine. I'm expecting more, histrionics and whatnot out of Israel and the Middle East. Like, I'm expecting it all. And last month for the newsletter, just to give you guys an idea, the title of the newsletter was Demoralized Nation, and the title of my lead article was Will We Be Spared Nothing? And my conclusion was that they're going to run Hillary versus Haley in the end. Can you imagine? Like, what would be more demoralizing for Americans than having to choose between Nikki Haley and Hillary Clinton? I hope I'm wrong.
Tom, you have a habit of anticipating my questions, because I was actually going to ask you a question about the US election and where Trump fits into all of this. Yeah. Well, as I said, you to a great extent already asked it, but here's the last question I'm going to put. Is this really why? Is this the real reason the Europeans are so terrified of Trump winning the election? That they're not really worried about NATO, because nobody really thinks that Trump is going to walk away from NATO. It's that they lose a friend in Washington who is trying to counter what the Fed is doing. Is that really what is unnerving the Europeans at this moment?
It is
worried
that.
more.
I think that's. I was going to say, Alex, I think that's slightly the wrong frame, but in essence, you're correct, right? What I think is, Biden was selected and put in power to do exactly what he's done, and he has failed at every major turn in terms of getting the fiscal stuff through that needed to get through. Build Back Better and the infrastructure bill and all that stuff was supposed to saddle the Fed with $6 to $8 trillion worth of spending over the next 2 years up until this election. That would have forced the Fed back to the zero bound, because the Fed would have been forced to monetize all this debt. Go back to QE and the zero bound. Powell is like, no, we're taking QE and zero bound rates out of our vocabulary. Like, get that through your head, and I think that Trump doesn't understand this, and if he does understand it, he's playing dumb. I think that he hasn't quite had the talk yet from the Wall Street guys that this is the plan, and we're going to cut rates after you're elected, and you're going to be able to ride herd over the first 6 to 9 months of your presidency. You're going to be dealing with an expansion where rates are now in the 4s, and that's going to be good for you. But we need to hold this at 5.5, because we need to put Europe back under our thumb, for lack of a better term. Hate to put it in those terms, but that's the way I see it. And We need to put them back in the box, and we need to break Europe. And Europe is trying to break us before we break them. It's a race, and they're racing to the election day.
Tom, one very last comment from me, not a question. I mean, Trump doesn't like the Europeans, and Jamie Dimon has recently said some nice things about him. And of course, Trump will know these Wall Street bankers. It's the kind of people he probably does know. That's my guess, anyway. I'm going to finish here. Go on.
Oh, I was going to say about Dimon. Remember when Dimon first came out and backed Nikki Haley? Everybody got it wrong, including myself. What Dimon was saying to his who lean left and generally vote Democrat Wall Street brethren, it's okay to vote to back a Republican. Now he shifted towards Trump because because Haley is clearly not running as a Republican. She's running as a Democrat, and she's clearly got money coming in from Democrats and from Soros and other sources. So that's why I can see Dimon, and I can see that not alliance, but I can see them moving back towards each other. And eventually I think there's going to be a very nice conversation between them at Mar-a-Lago with the phones off. And, then Trump is going to, run the Trump show from here on out. And then it'll be interesting to watch to see how that plays. That'll be my final comment on that. Go ahead.
Tom, I know you're up against the clock a bit. I've finished my questions, and I wanted to say thank you for this incredibly illuminating discussion. Alex, maybe you've got one or two things to ask.
Sure.
Yeah, Tom, if you have 5 minutes, maybe answer a couple of questions directed towards you, and then Alexander will answer the rest of the questions that came in. Tom, what about the Bradbury pound? 2 questions. The Bradbury pound.
No idea. That's the first time I've ever heard that term. I hate how much I hate not answering a question, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know it either, but yeah,
nor do I.
Nor
do I.
You don't know it either, Alexander. Okay.
No.
Zariel asks, Tom, why are all the big deals selling all their stocks on Wall Street, like Diamond, Rothschilds, etc.?
Okay. I'm going to start with Diamond because Diamond is easy. At the end of last year, Jamie Dimon put forth his succession plan for when he's no longer CEO of JP Morgan. Interestingly enough, in that succession plan, the snake in JP Morgan's garden, Mary Erdos, who's the one that actually handled all of Epstein's accounts at JP Morgan, by the way, was not part of that succession plan that I could see. She was also on his arm at Davos this year because I think that's a keep your friends close and your enemies closer kind of thing, that she couldn't be running off to cut backroom deals around him. I think Diamond is getting set up to step down as head of JP Morgan. You remember he had that aortic section a few years ago. He's old. It's time for him to move on. So he cashes out $146 million with the stock. He needs cash. Everybody else, that's a signal to me that, we need to top tick the market and get out of here because we're not going to have anything because this is all going to collapse on us. Facebook and Google and all that. I read that as the rats leaving the globalist sinking ship. I'm telling you, the more I read the tea leaves, the more I really do believe that this is what winning looks like. But it's really hard for us to feel like it's winning because the people that we're fighting against will never break character. Going back to Yanis Varoufakis and the Swedish national anthem thing when he was Greek prime minister. You present all this stuff to the European Commission and they go, "Oh, that's nice." They look at you like you just sung the Swedish national anthem at them, and then they go back to doing whatever they were going to do. They'll never break character. And the hours late, Sauron's forces are already moving, blah, 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 blah. It's going to be a very, very difficult fight to claw our way out of the situation that we're in. They have, it's late, fourth quarter, you're down by 10, you got 4 minutes on the clock, that kind of moment that we're in. But we're only down by 10. We're not down by 4 touchdowns like we were at halftime. That's where I think we kind of are.
Right.
And that's why I clearly see that these guys, and that's one of those signposts. If they're cashing out with markets at this moment, then that may be a way to read that. I'm not saying it's the only way to read it, but it's clearly one of them.
Okay. Commander Crossfire says, with the loss of Russian resources, cheap Middle Eastern oil, and free minerals and labor from Africa, a consolidation of Europe may be the only solution to hold the ruling establishment together.
And they're gonna. I think honestly, here's the thing. I think their European project is more important to them than tyrannizing Russia and subjugating Russia. I think for other forces that are, that's a different story. For the Anglo-American sphere, it's far different. When the Trotskyites that are the neocon conservatives, they want to subjugate Russia. That this is an existential thing and a psychological and ideological thing for them. I think the European Union folks, whatever you want to call them, the Eurocrats, they're ideologically committed to the European Union, and they are more than happy to cut a deal with Russia in the short term and oil imports from Russia in 2023. Well, statistics give you that number, right? That the Europeans bought more oil from Russia in 2023 than they did in 2022. Guess what? They're going to buy a lot more in 2024. They'll just break the sanctions. They don't care. That's more important to them. But because it's more important to them, they'll try and deal with Russia and China down the line. And if necessary, cut a deal with them, because what are they going to do otherwise? I think they're more committed to destroying the United States than they are committed to destroying Russia. That's, I think, the split, because the United States represents something legally and structurally that is anathema to their plans, right? Our federalism, our rule of law, the Constitution, nominally that the Constitution puts the people sovereign over the government. All those ideas, we can reclaim all those things from the corruption that exists in the United States today. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but we can do it, right? Those ideas are still buried deeply within the American psyche, and they can come out again. Again, some stuff that you and I, Alex, used to talk about 3, 4, 5 years ago, right? About why the United States is different. And I think that's why they're so focused on. Europe can't survive with the United States in its current form. There's no way. The United States is too powerful. They have to bring us down. And so they either get us involved in a world war that we can't afford to fight, or they bind us down with political traitors that, hollow the country out from within, invade it through the border, yada, yada, yada. That's clearly the plan.
All right, two more questions, or one question and one comment. From Seven, South Florida would break away from independent Florida to form the Republic of Miami in a heartbeat.
I saw this question earlier, and I'm like, yeah, that's kind of funny, but we're okay with coming along with you up here in North Florida. It's okay. The Sunshine Republic of Florida, we can post guards at the border on I-75 and I-95. We're good. We know what to do.
All right.
We have more guns up here, guys. We know how to use them. Trust me.
All right. One final question, and we will let you go. Tom from Rune says, the West is built on financial ivory towers. It must end by necessity at some point, as you can eat digits on a screen. Will BRICS be in time with a viable system to save us?
Save? I don't know that's the right frame for that. But are the BRICS forming an institution, a series of institutions that can protect themselves from the self-immolation of what's going on in the West? Yes. And maybe that's the best we can hope for in the next 10 years. A node of just look for nodes of stability, folks. And all of this, everything we talked about today is fractal in nature, right? From the BRICS versus the West to you versus your county commission or your local city council or whatever, your local town council. It's all the same process. Be nodes of stability for the people around you. Start there, and that's the easiest and best and most effective way to beat these people. And just by saying no and doing business locally and doing business outside of their purview. And it's the phrase that people have been using a lot recently is intentional communities. That's what the Duran is. That's what Gold Goats and Guns is. That's what these are all. We have virtual intentional communities. We leverage them and their power out as best we can, and we do it here on a commentary basis on a daily basis in order to try and disseminate the information necessary for you to do it in the real world in meat space. So we do it out here in Flatland, and then we take those ideas and those lessons, and we should be applying them in the real world in what I like to call meat space. And we do that. We have all of the political power in the world, every freaking bit of it. And I have a fundamental belief that humanity is far more resilient than we give it credit, than we want to give it credit for on our worst days.
Mm.
And I'm not saying that, it's going to be easy or it's going to be fun but Alex now has 3 young children. I've got a daughter that's graduating high school this year. Like this is what I know this is what drives us, and it should drive you. Let's make this, let's just, these people are just silly. And at the end of the day, we can just sit there and go, yeah, that's nice, but we're not doing that.
Mhm.
So let's just do that.
Fantastic way to end the show with Tom Luongo. I have all of your information in the description box down below, and I will also have it as a pinned comment as well. So definitely follow Tom. Check out his amazing articles and his analysis. And Tom, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you guys, and all the best. And we'll do this again soon if we can. And I'll drop off now. We'll see you soon.
Absolutely. Take care, Tom.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Tom. Take care. Bye.
All right, Alexander. Great. Wow, great stuff. I'm kind of rooting for the bankers in the U.S. now. What a wild world.
Jamie Dimon.
Jamie Dimon.
Jamie Dimon. I mean, quite.
I never imagined him as
the
a
world
good
is
guy.
very strange. The world is a
Good
guy. The world is certainly a strange place in some ways.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, a fantastic show. All right. Let's answer the questions that we have left, Alexander, and we will sign off for the day. Valley S, thank you for that super sticker. Robert, welcome to the Duran community. Elaine says, very happy to wait for the brilliant Duran. Thank you, Elaine. Robert says, my first live in a long time. So glad to be here on the only places to find truth. Jonar Games, welcome to Duran Communities. I hear, thank you for that super chat. Klaus says, happy birthday, Gonzalo. Not forgotten.
Yeah, not
Well
forgotten
said.
at all. Brilliant piece about Gonzalo, by the way, in Mint Press, comparing the coverage his death got with Navalny's, and reminding everybody of the point made by Chomsky and Herman in their book, was Constructing Consent, which is about worthy and unworthy victims, which is this concept that, the media follows, that there's some people who deserve to be honored and others who don't. And it's got nothing to do with whether they're good people or not good people. It's got nothing to do with the way in which they've been killed. It's just purely how it fits in with the ideological framework that the media and the powers are following. It's a brilliant piece. I highly recommend it.
Lana says, I finally caught Duran live. Hello, Lana. Zoltan, thank you for the super sticker. Lana also sent a super sticker. Moskva 1825. Alexander, do you believe that the SMO exposed collective West's weakness, emboldening countries in Africa and in Palestine to seek independence?
Yes, it has. There's no question about it. I mean, it's exposed a huge amount of weakness. And also, the opposite, of course, of the West's weakness is Russian strength, which was completely unexpected. And if you were watching my program yesterday, I sort of got a bit emotional at one point. And I was talking all about this huge operation the CIA was running in Ukraine. And I said, what good did he do in the end? It didn't make the West stronger, and it didn't make us better informed about Russia. We didn't learn anything about Russia from it because we got the whole situation there completely wrong. And you're absolutely right. It has emboldened countries in the global south, and you are seeing it every day, or the global majority, as I notice people are increasingly starting to refer to it. They're starting to stand up and they're pushing back, and I know that it's causing great concern amongst people in Washington and London especially.
The global majority, you said. That's the word that you used?
Majority.
Global majority.
That's the word. That's the expression. I've started to see it being used, and it's beginning to spread.
I recommend everyone watch Alexander's video from yesterday, and the end of your video, you read a tweet from David Sachs. which was a fantastic
Oh,
tweet.
it's tremendous. It's tremendous.
I know
As
he
I said,
watches us every now and then. I know he follows us, but that was a fantastic tweet.
it was.
I wish we could find it. I'm going to look for that tweet. And
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it left me speechless. And, you know, that doesn't happen very often, can I say? I mean, it really did. It said everything about the war in Ukraine in just a few words. Everything. It was all there. Everything. It was brilliant.
yeah, brilliant tweet. A good way for you to close your video yesterday. So yeah, definitely watch Alexander's video and definitely look for that tweet. Black Tie, thank you for that super sticker. Commando Crossfire says Russia just held the games of the future, fitting for their outlook, looking to a new era while Europe reaches back to 1939 or 1984.
Have they actually been held yet? I thought they were just starting, but anyway.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they were held. It looks like they were
Yeah.
held, but
Yeah,
I haven't been following that story too closely.
Yes.
But
No,
yeah.
I haven't, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely.
Envy
I wish them
Storm-
well, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Envy
it's
Storman
great
says,
idea.
good day and many thanks for all you do. Thank you very much. Robert McNamara says, is there any truth to the story that Ukraine intelligence tried to car bomb Tucker Carlson?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, what the Ukrainian intelligence would do. I mean, if they did, they would have been absolutely idiots to do a thing like that. That's my own personal view. But then who knows? With someone like Budanov in charge, even you know, the New York Times article tells us that he's an unpredictable and dangerous person. I mean, they might have done, but I mean, I haven't heard about it. And I doubt that they would do it, actually.
Tishem says, happy birthday, Gonzalo. I miss you. Ralph says, let's please remember Aaron Bushnell and family. The video is on the new Atlas.
Absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely haunting. Great video. Absolutely. It was really extraordinary thing. Very powerful statement. And again, by the way, complete radio silence about the whole story in the British media. I noticed. I mean, in the big mainstream newspapers, I didn't see any mention of it at all. Of course, lots of people in Britain know about it because people go to the internet, but the media here doesn't really want to talk about it.
Giuseppe, thank you for that super sticker. DW, welcome to the Duran community. Scott Elliott says, over under coup against Zelensky in a month. Zelensky takes over and withdraws to the Dnieper to defend, blackmails West with bioweapons. Remember the labs to enter war to push Russia back.
That's one possible. I mean, you know, we can all construct a possible, entirely plausible ways that this ends. We'll just have to wait and see. I mean, at the moment, all one can say is the Russians are pushing forward.
Yeah. Tish M says, justice for Gonzalo Lira.
Yeah.
Agreed. Tish M. Jeff, thank you for that super sticker. Joe Public says, what about the Bradbury pound? A lot of questions about the Bradbury pound. I'm going to look that up. Envy
we must
Storman.
find out about it.
Yeah. Thank you for the Duran membership. Envy Storman. Alex Glanz, thank you for that super sticker. Omar says, how much has NATO been weakened after the Russian military operation, and will it be able to recover? Wish you all the best.
You know, actually, since we're talking about David Sachs's tweet, he talks about that. It's been significantly weakened. All right, they got Finland and Sweden into NATO. But if you're looking at the position, the condition of NATO armies, which is already, it's clear, pretty fragile, they're in a terrible state. I mean, they're having, again, I discussed this in my program yesterday, the Europeans are now having to scrounge around Africa and the Middle East looking for shells because they can't produce any, and there aren't any in their inventories, and the American inventories are so short that presumably they're not prepared to sell any to the Europeans.
Jane Spear, welcome to our community. Donald Speed, thank you for that super sticker. SHH906, military coup a la Europe. Interesting. Evan Ritz, welcome to the Duran community.
Complicated thing to happen, actually.
Yeah. SHH906 says, do you think BRICS Plus could throw a wrench in this plan?
The EU's plan. If everything that they want to do happens, if they are successful, if everything that they're trying to do, then it will deepen the crisis and stagnation in Europe. So the BRICS are not there to help Europeans. They're not there to help Europe. They will capitalize on Europe's stagnation and weakness and developing crisis. And it is for us in Europe eventually to sort this out. We shouldn't look to outsiders to come to our rescue.
Yeah. I found the tweet. Is it the war of lies? The war in Ukraine is based on lies,
That's
lies
right,
about how it
that's right.
started, how it's going,
That's-
and how it will end. Yeah.
That's
Let me
the one.
put that link
That's the one.
in the chat.
Yeah.
I found it. Okay.
Yes.
Evan Ritz, welcome to the Duran community. Tatiana Carmichael, thank you for that super sticker. Robert, thank you for that super sticker. Elza says, guys, I have no idea what you were talking about, but I've learned that the Euro bonds are evil and the Duran community will save us. Thanks.
It is a technical subject, but it is pretty evil. Completely evil. It's also, if I can say, mad. And that's one of the problems. When things are mad, they're often difficult to explain. Sanity is simple. Madness is very complicated.
Yeah. Said. Tabernacle says monetary systems and ideologies change, but not war.
Yeah, true enough.
Said. And Nigel says, cheers, lads. Thank you, Nigel. Robert McNamara says the story was on Next News on Aaron Bushnell, I imagine, is what. Robert's
I'm
talking
sure.
about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tapato Matato says, is it worth even asking about the Russian elections? Have the Communist Party put forth their own candidate? What are the races besides presidential?
Well, I mean, it is a purely presidential election. Russia has presidential and parliamentary elections at different times and local elections at different times also. So the parliamentary elections are some way off and they always happen in the autumn. And the local elections also tend to happen in the autumn, the elections. So this is purely presidential elections, but absolutely the communists have indeed put up a candidate. His name is a man called Ivan Haritonov. He's run for the presidency before for the Communist Party. He's a veteran member of the party, so they'll be backing him. He was previous to joining the Communist Party, a member of an entirely different Russian party, the Agrarian Party, that got folded into the Communist Party. He's probably going to be the strongest candidate against Putin. But, everybody, every single opinion poll, survey of opinion in Russia, they all are united in agreeing that Putin is going to win a landslide. About 60 to 80%, somewhere in that massive range, but it's going to be huge.
Okay, Peace Right Now says Tom's great because he helps us to recognize those moments when we're winning. True. And Onijin says, thank you for all your hard work, Duran team. I've followed your content nearly 2 years. I'm amazed at consistency and substantive content. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we have one more. Alexander from Sophisticated Caveman. Not a fan of the America as a victim narrative. The country's collapsing in on itself because our people's excessive self-centeredness and ignorance, not Europe. Problems are far away elsewhere.
I don't think he was exactly, Tom wasn't talking about it being a victim. What he was talking about was a power struggle, in effect, between the American financial community and the European one. I think it's very, very careful not to, say this side is good and that side is bad. I think the difference was one side is bad and the other is worse. That was basically if I got his point. But he did say, and I think this is a fair point, that there are things about America which Europe doesn't have. It's got its constitution, it's got its history of democracy, which the European Union has nothing like that. It never has done. I mean, it's been an entirely constructed elite operation right from the outset. And there is perhaps more hope that one day the Americans themselves can find a way out and get their democracy back. I think that is what he did say, but he wasn't saying that these people in Wall Street are victims. He wasn't talking about them in those terms in any kind of way.
All right. Elsa says all people working in the German industry tell that their biggest problem is to find qualified workers, and Rheinmetall pretends to start production in Ukraine, where the situation is even worse.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the whole situation in Germany is terrible. Well, I mean, I'm not going to start about Ukraine, but just the other day, I'm sure lots of people have heard it. Miele, the people who make all that kitchen equipment, an absolutely rock solid Mittelstand company, one of the great flagship family businesses of Germany, is relocating production out of Germany. I've even been told that Porsche is doing the same. I'm not sure about Porsche, but Miele definitely is, and that is a shock. I mean, people in Germany are stunned, and it's a sign of the speed now with which deindustrialization is happening.
Yeah. All right. 2 more that came in, and we're signing out. Alexander from Tabernac. It's harder to submit an opponent than to defeat him. And
Yeah.
I can't read the name on this one, but it says David Sachs is awful when he's talking about China. He wants Taiwan to be close to the West, just like Ukraine. He should know better.
Well, he wrote, I think, one of the greatest things ever about Ukraine. And on Ukraine, he's been an absolute voice of courage and sanity. And heavens knows we need lots of those.
Yeah. All right. We will end it there. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this live stream. Thank you to Tom Luongo. Once again, I have all his information in the description box. It will be as a pinned comment as well when we end this stream. Alexander, any final thoughts, and we'll sign out?
This is a most interesting situation, but I really do wonder what the EU is going to do. I think there is panic growing there. At one point, I don't agree with Tom. I think they're absolutely terrified of Russia, actually, and I don't think they want to cut a deal. But they're also very frightened about what is going on in the US and the possibility that they're as much afraid for the EU, more afraid for the EU than they are for NATO. I think is a real one. So lots to think about with this, and we will see whether or not this Eurobond project takes off, and if so, when and what comes of it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you to our moderators, Valley S, Reckless Abandon, Tish M, Peter, Zarael, and I think that's everyone that was moderating today. Thank you very much, moderators, for everything that you do. I think I got everybody. And thank you to everyone that was watching us on Rockfin, Odyssey, Rumble, YouTube, and our amazing community on the locals, theduran.locals.com. Take care, everyone.